Flight 847 to Tokyo has been delayed due to mechanical issues. We apologize for any inconvenience caused to our passengers. The announcement echoed through Terminal B at LAX as I clutched my phone, checking for what felt like the 100th time in the past hour. Still nothing from Tyler. The departure gate was packed with frustrated travelers, some sprawled across uncomfortable chairs, others pacing near the windows overlooking the tarmac where our plane should have been boarding 20 minutes ago. I pulled my carry-on closer, the leather handle worn smooth from countless business trips, though none as important as this one. Tyler Harrison, my boyfriend of 2.5 years, was supposed to meet me here with our boarding passes for what he'd called the trip that would change everything between us. Today was our anniversary, and he'd promised something special in Tokyo, something that involved a small velvet box he thought I hadn't noticed hidden in his sock drawer last week. Everything was about to change, but not in the way either of us had planned. The terminal buzzed with the familiar chaos of delayed international flights. Families with small children tried to manage meltdowns, while business travelers typed furiously on laptops, their expressions grim as meetings got rescheduled. I'd been one of those business travelers once, before Tyler convinced me that our relationship should take priority over the demanding travel schedule my digital marketing consultancy required. Before I started turning down clients to accommodate his family's company events and social calendar. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Jessica Martinez, and if you'd asked me 3 hours ago, I would have told you I was living the dream. At 28, I'd built Martinez Digital Strategies from nothing into one of LA's most sought-after social media consulting firms, specializing in helping tech startups break into Latin American markets. My bilingual background and intuitive understanding of cultural nuances had made me the go-to strategist for companies wanting authentic engagement rather than superficial reach. Tyler had swept into my life at TechCrunch Disrupt 2 years ago, all confidence and charm, approaching my booth with questions about expanding his family's influencer marketing business into international markets. Harrison Digital Solutions was already established in the U.S. market, but Tyler, as the heir apparent, was looking to make his mark with global expansion. His interest had seemed genuine, both professional and personal, and I'd been flattered by the attention from someone whose family commanded such respect in the industry. The Harrison name carried weight in digital marketing circles. Richard Harrison had built the company from a small PR firm into a multi-million-dollar operation that managed some of the biggest influencers and tech personalities on the West Coast. Tyler was charming, well-connected, and everything my practical side told me I should want in a partner. He drove a Tesla, lived in Beverly Hills, and talked about our future with the kind of certainty that made planning seem effortless. I glanced at my phone again. 3:45 p.m. Tyler was supposed to have been here by 3:30 with our boarding passes, my passport, and the excitement of someone about to propose to the woman he loved. The flight delay was actually working in our favor, giving him extra time to navigate whatever LA traffic had caught him. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. The truth was, something had felt off for weeks. Tyler had been distant, taking calls in other rooms, spending late nights at the office on projects he claimed were too sensitive to discuss. When I'd suggested postponing the Tokyo trip to focus on a major client presentation, he'd insisted. We go, saying the timing was perfect and that Harrison Digital had everything under control. His urgency had seemed romantic then, like he couldn't wait another week to start the next chapter of our lives. Now, sitting in this delayed departure gate, I wondered if I'd misread everything. My phone buzzed, and my heart jumped until I saw it was Mia, my best friend and former business partner, texting from her coffee shop in Santa Monica. "How's Tokyo prep going? Still can't believe you're finally taking a real vacation." I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. A real vacation. Mia had been gently pushing me for months to take time off, pointing out that I'd been declining clients and shrinking my business footprint ever since Tyler and I had gotten serious. She thought I was working too hard, but the reality was more complicated. I'd been working less, earning less, and slowly watching my client base drift toward other consultants while I played the supportive girlfriend role Tyler seemed to prefer. Instead of responding to Mia, I tried Tyler's number again, straight to voicemail, just like the previous 5 attempts. "You've reached Tyler Harrison. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." The confident tone that had once made me smile now sounded hollow, almost mocking. "Tyler, it's me," I said after the beep, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm still at LAX Gate 47. The flight's delayed, but not by much. I really need you to call me back. I'm starting to worry something's happened." What I didn't say was that I was starting to worry about something else entirely. The growing suspicion that Tyler's absence wasn't accidental, that the strange behavior of the past few weeks hadn't been wedding stress but something much worse. The departure gate had thinned out as some passengers wandered off to find food or stretch their legs during the delay. I remained planted in my seat, guarding our spot and maintaining the increasingly desperate hope that Tyler would appear with apologies and explanations that made sense. The boarding passes were in his name, a detail that had seemed practical when he'd insisted on handling all the travel arrangements. Now it felt like a trap. A family with young children occupied the seats across from me, the parents taking turns, walking a fussy toddler while managing luggage and snacks. The mother caught my eye and smiled sympathetically, probably recognizing the universal expression of travel stress. I managed a weak smile in return, though my anxiety had nothing to do with flight delays and everything to do with the growing certainty that I'd been abandoned. My laptop bag contained everything I'd need for the Tokyo conference, including the presentation I'd been fine-tuning for weeks about emerging social media trends in global markets. Tyler had encouraged me to submit a speaking proposal, saying it would be good for both our careers to be seen as thought leaders in the international expansion space. The irony wasn't lost on me that I might be traveling alone to deliver insights about building trust across cultures while my own relationship crumbled due to deception. At 4 p.m., I received a text from an unknown number. "Sorry, running late. Traffic nightmare. Meet you at the gate in 20. Love you." No explanation for why he was texting from a different number. No acknowledgement of my increasingly frantic voicemails. Just a brief message that felt more like damage control than genuine communication from someone rushing to catch a flight with his girlfriend. 20 minutes stretched into 40, then an hour. The gate agent announced that boarding would begin shortly, and passengers started forming the usual chaotic lines according to their supposed boarding groups. I remained seated, phone in hand, watching the entrance to our gate area with the focus of someone whose entire future depended on a single person walking through those doors. Tyler didn't appear. At 5:15, they called for final boarding. I approached the gate agent, my heart pounding as I explained that my boyfriend had our boarding passes and was running late. The agent, probably accustomed to travel drama, checked the reservation system and shook her head sympathetically. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Harrison checked in this morning and already boarded. Are you traveling on a separate reservation?" The words hit like a physical blow. Tyler had already boarded. Without me. On our anniversary. On the trip where he was supposed to propose. "That's impossible," I said, my voice barely audible over the final boarding announcements. "We're traveling together. He has my ticket." The agent checked again, her expression growing more concerned. "I see 2 passengers under the Harrison reservation, Tyler Harrison and Victoria Sterling. They boarded about 30 minutes ago." Victoria Sterling. The name meant nothing to me, but the implication was crystal clear. Tyler hadn't been delayed by traffic or work emergencies. He'd deliberately left me stranded at LAX while boarding a flight to Tokyo with another woman. On our anniversary. Using tickets that were supposed to be ours. I stumbled away from the gate as they sealed the aircraft doors, my legs unsteady beneath me. The departure board showed Flight 847 backing away from the gate, right on schedule, despite the earlier delay. Through the terminal windows, I watched the plane taxi toward the runway, carrying my boyfriend and a woman named Victoria Sterling toward the future I'd thought was mine. The next few minutes passed in a haze of shock and practical crisis management. I had no boarding pass, no access to my own passport, which Tyler had insisted on keeping with the travel documents, and no clear understanding of how I'd gotten into this situation. My return ticket was also in his possession, along with the hotel confirmation and the credit card he'd designated for our shared travel expenses. I found an empty gate area and collapsed into a plastic chair, my hands shaking as I tried to process what had just happened. Tyler had abandoned me at the airport. Not accidentally, not due to miscommunication, but deliberately. He'd checked in, boarded a flight, and left for Tokyo with someone else while I sat waiting like an idiot in the departure lounge. My phone buzzed with notifications as messages started arriving from friends and colleagues who knew about the trip. Have an amazing time in Tokyo. Can't wait to hear about the big surprise. Send photos from the conference. Each well-meaning text felt like salt in a wound that was growing deeper by the minute. I needed to get home, but first I needed to understand what had just happened. Tyler's social media accounts were private to me, a detail I'd never questioned, since we'd been together for over 2 years. But Instagram's public search function still worked, and I found myself typing Tyler Harrison Tokyo with trembling fingers. The results made my stomach lurch. Posted 1 hour ago, a photo of Tyler and a stunning blonde woman raising champagne glasses in what looked like a first-class cabin. The woman's profile identified her as Victoria Sterling, founder of Sterling Social, a boutique influencer management company based in Seattle. The caption read, "Tokyo bound with my business partner and so much more. Excited for what this week will bring. Tokyo adventures, new beginnings, first class, business partner." The phrase echoed in my mind as I scrolled through Victoria's public posts. Photo after photo showed her and Tyler at industry events, business dinners, and casual meetings that I'd never heard about. The timestamps went back months, creating a timeline of a relationship that had been developing parallel to ours. I wasn't just being replaced, I was being erased. The realization that Tyler had been planning this for months while maintaining the pretense of our anniversary trip and possible proposal felt like drowning in reverse, water rushing into my lungs while I remained perfectly aware of every detail. He'd been stringing me along, keeping me invested in a future he'd already discarded, while building something new with Victoria Sterling. My phone rang, startling me out of my spiral. Mia's name appeared on the screen, and I answered without thinking. Jess, I just saw Tyler's Instagram story. Who's the blonde, and why aren't you in the photo? The question broke something inside me. I don't know who she is, I said, my voice cracking. Tyler left me at the airport. He took someone else to Tokyo. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then Mia's voice came back, sharp with anger. He what? Jessica, where are you right now? LAX, Terminal B. I can't even get home because he has my passport and I don't have money for a taxi. The practical realities of my situation were becoming clearer as the shock wore off. Tyler had been managing our shared expenses for the trip, which meant I had about $60 in cash and a credit card that might or might not work, depending on whether he'd made good on his promise to add me as an authorized user. Stay exactly where you are, Mia commanded. I'm coming to get you. And Jessica, we're going to figure out what the hell just happened and make sure he pays for this. As I waited for Mia to navigate LAX traffic, I continued scrolling through Victoria Sterling's social media presence, piecing together a picture that grew more disturbing with each post. She wasn't just Tyler's new romantic interest. She was his business collaborator, attending Harrison digital client meetings and strategy sessions that I'd never heard about. Posts from the past 6 months showed her at industry conferences where Tyler had claimed to be attending alone. At business dinners he'd said were internal Harrison Digital affairs, and at social events he'd supposedly skipped to spend time with me. The scope of the deception was staggering. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Tyler hadn't just been cheating on me romantically. He'd been conducting a parallel professional life, building business relationships and pursuing opportunities while keeping me carefully compartmentalized and uninformed. All those late nights at the office, all those sensitive projects he couldn't discuss, all those industry events he'd claimed were boring or inappropriate for me to attend. He'd been building a future with Victoria Sterling while maintaining me as what? A placeholder? A convenience? The more I discovered, the more I realized how systematically I'd been excluded from Tyler's real life over the past year. What I'd interpreted as him respecting my independence and not wanting to overwhelm me with Harrison Digital Business had actually been him creating space for someone else to fill the role I'd thought was mine. By the time Mia arrived at passenger pickup, my shock had crystallized into something harder and more focused. Anger. Not just at Tyler's betrayal, but at my own willingness to shrink my life to accommodate his preferences. I'd turned down international clients to be available for his schedule. I'd scaled back my speaking engagements to avoid conflicts with Harrison Digital events. I'd gradually made myself smaller and more manageable, and Tyler had still found me insufficient. "Tell me everything," Mia said as I collapsed into her passenger seat, exhaustion and adrenaline warring in my system. As we drove through LA traffic toward my Santa Monica apartment, I began reconstructing the past few months with brutal honesty. Tyler's decreased interest in my work, his subtle discouragement of my more ambitious projects, his insistence on handling travel arrangements and social planning. What I'd seen as him taking care of me had actually been him controlling my access to information and opportunities. This wasn't sudden, I realized aloud as we pulled into my apartment complex. He's been planning this for months, maybe longer. Mia parked and turned to face me fully. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I looked up at my apartment building, thinking about the life I'd been living and the life I'd thought I was building toward. Tyler had my passport, my travel documents, and apparently my professional reputation. Considering how seamlessly Victoria Sterling had stepped into business relationships I'd thought were being developed for our shared future. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated who he was dealing with. I'd built my entire career on understanding influence, engagement, and the power of authentic storytelling. I knew how to research, how to build networks, and how to expose inconsistencies in carefully crafted public personas. Tyler Harrison had just given me the biggest project of my life, and he was about to discover that abandoning a digital marketing strategist at an airport was the worst tactical error of his privileged existence. "I'm going to destroy him," I said quietly, the certainty in my voice surprising both of us. "But first I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with." As we climbed the stairs to my apartment, my phone buzzed with a notification. Tyler had posted another update from the plane, this time showing his and Victoria's hands intertwined over what looked like an engagement ring. The caption read, "Sometimes the best surprises are the ones you never saw coming." She said yes. "Tokyo, here we come. Engaged. Your new chapter Tar's love wins." He'd proposed to Victoria Sterling, with the ring I'd thought was meant for me, on the anniversary of our relationship, while I sat stranded in an airport, still believing he was caught in traffic. The audacity was breathtaking, but it was also a gift. Tyler had just provided me with a public timeline and documented evidence of his deception. In his eagerness to celebrate his new relationship, he'd created a digital trail that could be used to expose the calculated nature of his betrayal. Mia read the post over my shoulder and swore in Spanish. "Jessica, this is beyond cruel. This is sociopathic." She was right, but she was also wrong about one crucial detail. Tyler might be sociopathic, but he wasn't smart. He'd left a digital marketing expert angry, motivated, and with nothing left to lose. In the world of social media and online reputation management, that was the equivalent of handing a loaded weapon to someone you'd just declared war on. As I unlocked my apartment door, I was already formulating a plan. Tyler Harrison had just made the biggest mistake of his life, and I was going to make sure everyone in our industry knew exactly what kind of man they were dealing with. The game was about to begin, and Tyler had no idea he was already losing. The first thing I did after Mia left was pour myself a glass of wine and sit down at my laptop. If Tyler thought he could simply erase me from his life without consequences, he was about to learn otherwise. My apartment felt different now, smaller somehow, as if the future I'd been planning had taken up physical space that was now conspicuously empty. I started with what I knew best: digital footprints. Tyler's public social media presence was carefully curated, all professional achievements and lifestyle shots that painted him as the successful heir to a digital marketing empire. But social media was my expertise, and I knew how to look beyond the polished surface. LinkedIn was my first stop. Tyler's professional network had expanded significantly over the past year, with dozens of new connections in the Seattle tech scene. Victoria Sterling appeared throughout his activity, commenting on posts and sharing industry insights that suggested a level of collaboration far beyond what I'd been led to believe. Their professional relationship had a timeline that stretched back almost 18 months, meaning Tyler had been building something with her since before our first anniversary. The pattern became clearer as I dug deeper. Tyler had been systematically connecting with my former clients, the ones I'd stepped back from to accommodate his schedule. 3 companies I'd worked with in the past year were now following Victoria: Sterling's agency, Sterling Social. The timing wasn't coincidental. Tyler had been feeding her information about my client relationships, my strategic approaches, even my pricing structures. My phone rang, interrupting my investigation. The caller ID showed my landlord's number, which seemed odd for a Sunday evening. "Jessica, I hope I'm not calling too late," Mrs. Chen said, her voice apologetic. "I received a call today from someone claiming to be your boyfriend. He said you'd decided not to renew your lease and would be moving out at the end of the month. I wanted to confirm this with you directly." The bottom dropped out of my stomach. "What exactly did he say?" "He mentioned that you were moving in together and wouldn't need the apartment anymore. He even offered to handle the lease termination, paperwork, and forfeit your security deposit to make things easier for me." Tyler was trying to erase my living situation along with everything else. The calculation was breathtaking in its thoroughness. Leave me stranded at the airport, take my travel documents, and simultaneously eliminate my housing to create maximum chaos and dependency. "Mrs. Chen, I absolutely did not authorize anyone to discuss my lease," I said, working to keep my voice steady. "That person had no right to contact you, and I have no intention of moving out." "I thought it seemed strange," she admitted. "You've been such a reliable tenant, and you never mentioned any plans to relocate. I'll disregard that call entirely." After hanging up, I realized Tyler's strategy was more sophisticated than simple abandonment. He was attempting to systematically dismantle my life in Los Angeles, perhaps assuming I'd be forced to accept whatever minimal settlement he offered, rather than rebuild from nothing. The level of premeditation was staggering. I returned to my laptop with renewed focus. If Tyler wanted to play strategic games, he was dealing with someone who understood digital warfare better than he realized. I opened my professional database and began documenting every client interaction, every strategic recommendation, and every piece of intellectual property I'd developed over the past 2 years. The picture that emerged was damning. Multiple strategies I'd developed for Harrison Digital's international expansion had been repackaged and presented by Victoria Sterling to new clients. My research on Latin American social media trends had become the foundation for Sterling Social's market positioning. Even my presentation formats and visual design elements had been copied almost exactly. Tyler hadn't just stolen my boyfriend status. He'd been systematically appropriating my professional work and handing it to his new partner. My doorbell rang at nearly 11 p.m., which was unusual enough to make me cautious. Through the peephole, I could see a woman I didn't recognize, professionally dressed despite the late hour. "Jessica Martinez?" she asked when I cracked the door open with the chain still attached. "My name is Amanda Harrison. I think we need to talk." Amanda Harrison, Tyler's sister. I'd heard him mention her occasionally, usually in dismissive terms, about her decision to start her own boutique marketing firm rather than joining the family business. According to Tyler, Amanda was idealistic and impractical, too concerned with ethics to succeed in competitive markets. Looking at her now, standing confidently in my hallway at 11 p.m., she didn't seem impractical at all. "Tyler doesn't know I'm here," she said immediately, as if reading my hesitation. "In fact, he'd be furious if he knew I was reaching out to you. But I think you deserve to know what you're really dealing with." I removed the chain and opened the door fully. Amanda Harrison was tall and elegant, with Tyler's dark hair but none of his smug confidence. Her expression was serious, almost grim. "How did you know where I live?" I asked as she entered my apartment. "Tyler's been planning this for months," she said without preamble. "I've been watching him set everything up, and I couldn't stay silent after what happened today. What he did to you at the airport was unconscionable, but it's part of a much larger pattern." Amanda settled onto my couch and opened a leather portfolio she'd been carrying. "My brother has done this before, Jessica, multiple times. He identifies successful women in our industry, cultivates relationships with them, extracts their expertise and client connections, then discards them when he finds a more advantageous opportunity." She handed me a tablet displaying what looked like a private investigation report. "This is Sarah Kim. Tyler dated her for 8 months 2 years ago. She was a rising star in influencer marketing with a specialty in K-pop and Korean beauty brands. By the time Tyler finished with her, she'd lost 3 major clients and her business partner. She ended up moving back to Seoul. The photos showed a young woman who looked devastated, alongside documentation of social media harassment and professional sabotage that had destroyed her LA-based business. "And this is Monica Reeves," Amanda continued, swiping to another section. "PR executive with connections throughout the entertainment industry. Tyler dated her for almost a year, gradually isolated her from her professional network, then left her for someone with better family connections. Monica's struggling to rebuild her career in Phoenix now." The pattern was identical to what I was experiencing, but seeing it laid out systematically made the scope of Tyler's predatory behavior undeniable. He was a serial professional predator, using romantic relationships to exploit women's careers for his own advancement. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, though I was beginning to understand. "Because you're different from the others," Amanda said. "Sarah and Monica were blindsided. They never saw it coming and didn't know how to fight back. But you're a digital strategist, Jessica. You understand how to build campaigns, how to control narratives, how to expose inconsistencies. Tyler's finally targeted someone who has the skills to destroy him." She leaned forward, her expression intense. "My father built Harrison Digital on genuine expertise and client relationships. Tyler's turning it into a predatory operation that destroys women's careers for short-term gains. He's damaging our family's reputation and everything my father worked to create." The family dynamics were more complex than Tyler had ever revealed. He'd painted Amanda as a naive idealist who couldn't handle the demands of serious business. In reality, she seemed to be the one family member with actual ethical standards. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked. Amanda smiled for the first time since arriving. an alliance. You expose Tyler's pattern of behavior, and I provide you with resources and information he doesn't know I have. Harrison Digital has vulnerabilities that Tyler's created through his reckless pursuit of shortcuts and stolen strategies. She opened another file on the tablet. Tyler's been violating non-disclosure agreements, misrepresenting client outcomes, and using Harrison Digital resources to build Victoria Sterling's competing business. My father doesn't know the extent of it yet, but I've been documenting everything. The evidence was comprehensive. Screenshots of confidential client communications Tyler had shared with Victoria, financial records showing Harrison Digital resources being used for Sterling social projects, even recordings of Tyler bragging about his manipulation tactics at industry events. Your father doesn't know about any of this? I asked. My father's been gradually stepping back from day-to-day operations, letting Tyler take more control. Tyler's been careful to hide his worst behavior from Dad, but he's been sloppy about covering his tracks with me. He assumes I'm too principled to use information against him. Amanda's strategy was becoming clear. She wanted to save her family's business from Tyler's toxic influence while helping me get justice for his treatment of me and the other women he'd victimized. There's something else you should know, she continued. Tyler's engagement to Victoria Sterling isn't just romantic. It's a business merger. Victoria's been negotiating to acquire several of Harrison Digital's major clients, effectively poaching them while pretending to be Tyler's romantic partner. Once the transfer is complete, she'll break up with him and he'll be left with a depleted client base and a damaged reputation. The irony was perfect. Tyler thought he was playing Victoria, but she was actually playing him. His pattern of manipulating women for professional gain had finally led him to someone more ruthless than he was. So, Victoria's using the same tactics Tyler perfected on other women? Exactly, but Tyler's too arrogant to recognize it. He thinks he's found his perfect partner in crime, but Victoria's been setting him up for professional destruction from the beginning. I processed this information while pouring Amanda a glass of wine. Tyler was being manipulated by someone who understood his weaknesses better than he understood hers. But that didn't change what he'd done to me or the other women Amanda had. Documented. What do you need from me? I asked. Public exposure. Tyler's reputation is built on image management and strategic networking. If his pattern of behavior becomes widely known in our industry, his credibility will collapse. But it needs to come from one of his victims, not from me. Family drama can be dismissed as sibling rivalry. Amanda was right. My professional reputation in digital marketing meant my voice would carry weight with industry contacts. A carefully crafted campaign exposing Tyler's predatory behavior would be devastating if executed correctly. I'll need everything you have, I said. Documentation, evidence, contact information for Sarah and Monica. If I'm going to destroy Tyler professionally, it needs to be thorough and undeniable. Amanda handed me a secure drive from her portfolio. Everything's on there. Financial records, communication logs, client information, even psychological profiles I commissioned from a consultant who specializes in workplace predators. The level of preparation was impressive. Amanda had been building a case against her brother for months, waiting for the right opportunity to deploy it. There's one more thing, she said as she prepared to leave. Tyler's planning to announce his departure from Harrison Digital next week to start a new venture with Victoria. He thinks he's being strategic, but he's actually walking into a trap. Victoria's been coordinating with several of our competitors to isolate Tyler once he's no longer protected by the family business. The timeline was accelerating. Tyler would be most vulnerable during his transition period, when he'd burned bridges with Harrison Digital, but hadn't yet established independent credibility. It was the perfect window for a coordinated attack on his reputation. After Amanda left, I spent the rest of the night reviewing the evidence she'd provided. The documentation was meticulous, painting a picture of systematic predatory behavior that extended far beyond romantic manipulation. Tyler had been running elaborate cons on successful women, extracting their professional value before discarding them and moving on to the next target. But Amanda's intelligence also revealed Tyler's critical weakness: his need for public validation and industry recognition. His entire identity was built on being seen as a successful, charismatic leader in digital marketing. Destroying that image would be more devastating than any financial penalty. I started drafting a comprehensive exposure campaign, something that would systematically dismantle Tyler's professional reputation while highlighting the experiences of his victims. The approach needed to be strategic, building momentum gradually, rather than making accusations that could be dismissed as revenge from a bitter ex-girlfriend. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hope you figured out how to get home from the airport. Maybe next time don't be so needy and demanding. Some of us have real careers to focus on." Tyler. Still cruel, still arrogant, still completely unaware of what he'd set in motion by abandoning me. I screenshot the message and added it to my growing evidence file. Every communication from him would become part of the narrative that would ultimately destroy him. I replied simply, "Thank you for clarifying where your priorities are. Very helpful information." Let him interpret that however he wanted. By the time I was finished, Tyler Harrison would understand exactly how helpful that information had been. Over the next few days, I methodically contacted Sarah Kim and Monica Reeves, the other women Amanda had identified as Tyler's previous victims. Both were initially hesitant to discuss their experiences, but my detailed knowledge of Tyler's tactics and Amanda's corroborating evidence gradually convinced them to share their stories. Sarah's experience was particularly devastating. Tyler had convinced her to introduce him to her Korean industry contacts, claiming he wanted to help expand her business internationally. Instead, he developed direct relationships with her clients and gradually convinced them that Sarah was unreliable and difficult to work with. By the time she realized what was happening, her client base had been systematically transferred to Tyler's preferred vendors. He destroyed 2 years of relationship building in about 6 months, Sarah told me during our video call from Seoul. I had to start completely over in a different market because my reputation in LA was ruined. Monica's story followed a similar pattern, but with entertainment industry connections rather than international markets. Tyler had used her access to build his own network, while undermining her credibility with subtle rumors and strategic betrayals. The worst part was how he made me complicit in my own destruction, Monica explained. He convinced me that sharing my contacts was supporting our relationship and building our future together. I handed him everything he needed to replace me. Both women agreed to contribute their stories to my exposure campaign, understanding that Tyler's pattern would continue unless someone stopped him. We coordinated our approach carefully, planning a multi-platform revelation that would be impossible for Tyler to dismiss or contain. Meanwhile, Amanda provided regular updates on Tyler's situation with Victoria Sterling. His transition away from Harrison Digital was proceeding as expected, with Tyler convinced he was making a brilliant strategic move. He'd already started, distancing himself from family business operations, burning bridges with longtime clients who weren't impressed by his increasingly erratic behavior. "Dad's starting to ask questions," Amanda reported during one of our regular check-ins. "Tyler's been sloppy about covering his tracks lately, probably because he's distracted by wedding planning and business transitions. Some of our major clients have been asking about continuity and whether Tyler's departure means they should consider other agencies." The timing was perfect. Tyler's professional reputation was already becoming unstable due to his own poor decisions. My exposure campaign would simply accelerate a process he'd started himself. I spent a week crafting the perfect launch strategy. Rather than a single explosive revelation, I planned a gradual release of information across multiple platforms and industry channels. LinkedIn articles about predatory behavior in digital marketing, anonymous tips to industry publications about ethical violations, strategic conversations with key influencers who could amplify the message organically. The goal wasn't just to destroy Tyler's current reputation, but to ensure that his pattern of behavior became permanently associated with his name in professional circles. Anyone who Googled Tyler Harrison should immediately find detailed documentation of his predatory tactics and the women whose careers he'd damaged. But I also wanted him to know it was coming. The anticipation, the gradual realization that his carefully constructed image was collapsing, would be almost as satisfying as the ultimate exposure. I started small. An anonymous industry newsletter received a tip about emerging concerns regarding ethical standards in influencer marketing partnerships. A professional women's networking group got a heads up about patterns of professional manipulation that members should be aware of. Key clients of Harrison Digital began receiving carefully worded warnings about leadership transitions and potential impacts on service quality. Each move was subtle, building a foundation of concern and suspicion that would make the eventual full revelation more credible and impactful. Tyler's reputation was already beginning to show cracks before he even realized he was under attack. The beauty of digital marketing expertise was understanding how information spreads and how perceptions form in professional networks. Tyler had taught me well, though probably not in the way he'd intended. Now I was using those skills to dismantle everything he'd built through manipulation and theft. The first direct response came 3 days later. Tyler called from Tokyo, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Jessica, what the hell do you think you're doing?" I was sitting in my apartment, laptop open to a carefully crafted LinkedIn article I'd just published about recognizing manipulative behavior in professional relationships. The piece hadn't mentioned Tyler by name, but anyone familiar with our industry would recognize the patterns I described. "I'm not sure what you mean," I replied, keeping my voice neutral while recording the call on my phone. Everything Tyler said would become evidence now. "Don't play stupid. I know you've been spreading rumors about me to clients. Monica Reeves contacted me today asking about concerning allegations she'd heard. What did you tell her?" The irony was delicious. Tyler was upset that Monica, one of his previous victims, had reached out to warn him that his behavior was becoming known. He had no idea that Monica was actually part of our coordinated exposure effort. "I haven't spread any rumors," I said truthfully. "I've simply been reconnecting with colleagues and sharing my experiences in the industry. You know how networking works, Tyler. People talk." "Your experiences?" His voice rose dangerously. "What experiences? I gave you opportunities you never would have had otherwise. I introduced you to clients, helped you expand your business, supported your career in ways you're apparently too ungrateful to remember." The gaslighting was textbook, exactly what Amanda had warned me to expect. Tyler was trying to rewrite history, positioning himself as my benefactor rather than my exploiter. "That's an interesting perspective," I replied. "Though I'm curious about something. How did Victoria Sterling end up working with 3 of my former clients? The ones you said weren't a good fit for my services anymore?" The silence stretched, long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. When Tyler finally responded, his voice had shifted to something colder and more calculated. "Victoria's company provides services that yours couldn't handle. It's not personal, Jessica. It's business. Maybe if you'd been more focused on growing your capabilities instead of playing girlfriend, you'd understand the difference." The cruelty was breathtaking, but also useful. I was recording every word, building a library of Tyler's own statements. That would later demonstrate his manipulative mindset and lack of empathy for the women he'd damaged. "I see," I said. "So when you told me to turn down the Samsung project because it would interfere with your family events, that was actually about my capabilities?" Another pause. Tyler was realizing that I remembered details he'd hoped I'd forgotten or dismissed. "You're twisting things," he said finally. "Look, I understand you're hurt about how things ended between us, but trying to damage my reputation isn't going to bring me back. Victoria and I are building something together, something bigger than what you and I had." You need to accept that and move on." "Oh, I am moving on," I assured him. "In fact, I'm making excellent progress. You'd be surprised how much I've learned about building something bigger." I ended the call before he could respond, my hands trembling slightly from adrenaline. The conversation had gone exactly as Amanda predicted it would. Tyler was panicking, but trying to maintain control through intimidation and manipulation. His responses confirmed everything we suspected about his mindset and methods. Within an hour, Amanda called with an update from Harrison Digital's offices. "Tyler's been calling Dad frantically since he got back from Tokyo," she reported. "He's claiming you're mounting some kind of vendetta campaign against him and that it's affecting Harrison Digital's reputation. Dad's confused because he doesn't understand what Tyler's talking about, but he's starting to ask questions about Tyler's recent business decisions." This was the opening Amanda had been waiting for. Richard Harrison was finally becoming aware that something was wrong with his son's professional conduct. "What kind of questions?" I asked. Dad pulled Tyler's client communications from the past year and found the messages Tyler sent to your former clients. The ones where Tyler explicitly discouraged them from working with you while recommending Victoria's company instead. Dad was furious because those communications came from Harrison Digital email accounts and could expose the company to interference claims. Tyler's sloppiness was catching up with him. Using company resources to sabotage my business relationships was exactly the kind of ethical violation that could destroy Harrison Digital's reputation if it became public. "There's more," Amanda continued. "Dad discovered that Tyler's been using Harrison Digital's software licenses and marketing tools to help Victoria build her client presentations. Essentially, he's been stealing company resources to assist a competitor." The evidence was mounting faster than even Amanda had anticipated. Tyler's arrogance had led him to leave digital fingerprints throughout Harrison Digital's systems, creating an undeniable trail of misconduct. "Is your father planning to confront Tyler directly?" "He's scheduled a meeting for tomorrow morning. Dad's bringing the company lawyer and HR director. I think Tyler's about to discover that his family connections won't protect him from the consequences of his actions." While Tyler dealt with escalating pressure from his family, I accelerated my public campaign. The anonymous industry newsletter published a follow-up piece about documented cases of professional predation in digital marketing, featuring carefully anonymized but recognizable details from Sarah's, Monica's, and my experiences. The article included specific tactics to watch for: isolated professional contacts, discredited expertise, transferred client relationships, and systematic reputation destruction. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My inbox flooded with messages from other women in the industry, sharing similar experiences with various male colleagues. Tyler wasn't the only predator operating in our professional circles, but he was apparently one of the most systematic and ruthless. More importantly, several prominent industry leaders reached out to express concern and offer support. The narrative was shifting from individual complaints to recognition of a broader pattern that needed industry-wide attention. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, my former marketing professor at USC and now a respected industry consultant, called me directly after reading the newsletter piece. "Jessica, I've been watching your recent professional activities with great interest," she said, her voice carrying the authority that had made her such an effective mentor. "I think it's time we had a conversation about your next steps." Dr. Rodriguez had always been more than an academic mentor. Her consulting firm, Rodriguez Strategic, worked with major corporations on digital transformation and ethical marketing practices. She had the kind of industry credibility that could transform my exposure campaign from personal vendetta to professional reform movement. "I've been contacted by several companies that are concerned about potential predatory behavior in their vendor relationships," she continued. "They're looking for expertise in identifying and preventing the kind of manipulation tactics that have apparently become widespread in our industry." The opportunity was extraordinary. Instead of just destroying Tyler's reputation, I could position myself as a leader in addressing systemic problems that affected countless women in digital marketing. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked. "A consulting partnership. You provide the tactical expertise and first-hand knowledge of predatory patterns. I provide the established client relationships and institutional credibility. Together, we develop comprehensive assessment and prevention protocols that companies can implement to protect themselves and their employees." Dr. Rodriguez was offering me a chance to transform my victimization into valuable expertise, building a new career path while helping other women avoid Tyler's manipulation tactics. "There's one condition," she added. "Everything we do has to be completely professional and evidence-based. This can't be perceived as personal revenge, even though I understand that's part of your motivation. We're building something bigger than Tyler Harrison." She was right, of course. My campaign against Tyler was already succeeding beyond my expectations, but it needed to evolve into something more substantial and lasting. Personal revenge was satisfying, but professional transformation was powerful. "I'm very interested," I told her. "When can we meet?" "Oh?" We scheduled a meeting for the following week, giving me time to prepare a comprehensive presentation of my research and evidence. Dr. Rodriguez wanted to see everything: Tyler's manipulation tactics, the documentation Amanda had provided, the experiences of other victims, and my analysis of how these patterns could be systematically identified and prevented. While I prepared for this career-defining opportunity, Tyler's situation continued deteriorating rapidly. Amanda provided regular updates that painted a picture of escalating chaos at Harrison Digital. The meeting with Dad went worse than Tyler. "Expected," she reported during our evening check-in. Dad showed Tyler the evidence of misused company resources and client interference. Tyler tried to claim it was all misunderstandings and strategic partnerships, but Dad brought the lawyer who explained exactly how much legal exposure Tyler had created. Richard Harrison was finally seeing his son clearly, and he didn't like what he discovered. What happened next? Tyler was given an ultimatum. He could resign immediately with a minimal severance package and confidentiality agreement, or Dad would pursue formal misconduct proceedings that could result in professional sanctions and civil liability. The timeline was accelerating faster than any of us had anticipated. Tyler's professional destruction was happening through multiple channels simultaneously: family consequences, industry exposure, and client defections. Did Tyler accept the resignation offer? He asked for time to consider his options, which was a mistake. Dad interpreted that as Tyler trying to negotiate from a position of weakness. The severance offer was withdrawn, and Tyler was suspended pending a formal investigation. Tyler's arrogance had finally backfired completely. His assumption that family loyalty would protect him from consequences had proven catastrophically wrong. But Tyler's response to his suspension was exactly what Amanda and I had feared he might do. Instead of accepting responsibility or attempting damage control, he escalated his attacks on me. The harassment started subtly. Negative reviews of my business appeared on multiple platforms, all from newly created accounts with suspicious posting patterns. My professional social media accounts experienced coordinated reporting campaigns designed to trigger automated suspensions. Several of my current clients received anonymous messages questioning my stability and professional competence. Tyler was trying to destroy my reputation before I could finish destroying his. The attacks were sophisticated enough to suggest Tyler had hired professional reputation management services, probably using personal funds since he no longer had access to Harrison Digital resources. But they were also desperate and poorly coordinated, clearly the work of someone panicking rather than strategizing. I documented everything meticulously, screenshots and timestamps creating an undeniable record of Tyler's retaliatory harassment. Each attack became additional evidence of his predatory mindset and willingness to damage women who challenged him. But Tyler made one critical error in his desperation. He sent a threatening email from his personal account to my business address, probably assuming I wouldn't save it or wouldn't be able to prove he'd sent it. "You have no idea what you've started," the message read. "I have connections and resources you can't imagine. If you don't stop spreading lies about me, I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. Your little revenge fantasy is about to become your worst nightmare." The email was legally actionable harassment, clearly threatening professional retaliation for protected speech about workplace misconduct. But more importantly, it demonstrated Tyler's complete lack of understanding about who he was threatening. I forwarded the email to Amanda, Dr. Rodriguez, and the lawyer Amanda had recommended for potential legal action. Within hours, I had a comprehensive legal response strategy and multiple professional allies ready to defend me against Tyler's escalating attacks. Dr. Rodriguez called me that evening, her voice sharp with anger after reviewing Tyler's threatening email. "This changes our timeline," she said immediately. "Tyler's threatening behavior needs to be addressed before he escalates further. I'm moving our meeting to tomorrow, and I'm bringing 2 of my most influential clients. They need to see this evidence and understand why their companies need protection protocols." The following morning, I found myself in Dr. Rodriguez's downtown LA office, presenting my research to executives from 2 Fortune 500 companies that relied heavily on digital marketing partnerships. My presentation had evolved from personal testimony to comprehensive case study of predatory behavior patterns in professional relationships. The executives were horrified by the evidence I presented, but they were also impressed by my analysis and recommendations. Tyler's systematic approach to exploitation had created vulnerabilities that could affect any company working with external marketing consultants. "This is exactly the kind of risk assessment we need," said Jennifer Walsh, VP of Marketing at a major retail corporation. "Our company works with dozens of independent consultants and small agencies. We have no protocols for identifying or preventing this kind of professional predation." The other executive, David Kim from a tech company, nodded in agreement. The potential legal exposure alone justifies comprehensive prevention measures. But the ethical implications are even more significant. We can't be complicit in enabling predatory behavior, even inadvertently. Dr. Rodriguez presented our proposed consulting partnership as the solution. Together, we would develop assessment, protocols, training programs, and reporting systems that companies could implement to protect themselves and their vendors from predatory manipulation. Both executives authorized immediate consulting contracts, providing me with substantial financial resources and prestigious client relationships that would establish my credibility in this new specialization. As we finalized the initial agreements, my phone buzzed with an urgent message from Amanda. "Emergency. Tyler's hired a crisis management firm. They're planning a preemptive media campaign to discredit you before your story gains more traction. We need to meet immediately." The war was escalating again, but this time Tyler was fighting from a position of desperation rather than strength. His family had turned against him, his professional reputation was collapsing, and his attempts at intimidation had backfired spectacularly. But desperate people were dangerous, especially when they had resources and connections. Tyler's crisis management strategy could potentially muddy the narrative enough to create doubt about my credibility and the evidence we'd compiled. I excused myself from the client meeting and agreed to meet Amanda at her Manhattan Beach office. The time for subtle strategic moves was ending. Tyler had chosen to wage open warfare, and he was about to discover that he'd brought conventional weapons to a digital fight. As I drove toward Manhattan Beach, I realized that everything had changed. Since that moment at LAX when Tyler abandoned me, I was no longer the person who had waited desperately for him to appear. No longer someone whose life could be disrupted by his manipulative games. Tyler had created a formidable enemy by underestimating who he was dealing with. Now he was about to face the full consequences of that miscalculation. The woman he'd left stranded at the airport was gone, replaced by someone with powerful allies, substantial resources, and a clear understanding of exactly how to destroy everything he'd built through deception and exploitation. Tyler Harrison's nightmare was just beginning, and he'd created it entirely through his own arrogant cruelty. Amanda's office overlooked the Pacific, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view that normally would have been calming. Today, the space felt charged with urgency as Amanda spread printed documents across her conference table like evidence in a war room. Tyler's crisis management team is called Meridian Strategic, she said without preamble. They specialize in reputation repair for executives caught in scandals. Their strategy is always the same: discredit the accusers, muddy the narrative, and create enough doubt to prevent complete career destruction. I studied the documents Amanda had compiled about Meridian Strategic. Their client list read like a who's who of powerful men who'd survived various professional scandals through aggressive counter-narratives and strategic media manipulation. How do you know their strategy? I asked. Because I hired a private investigator to monitor Tyler's activities after he was suspended, Amanda admitted. I needed to know if he was planning something that could damage Harrison Digital further. The investigator confirmed that Tyler met with Meridian's founder yesterday and authorized a substantial retainer. The timeline was concerning. Tyler was moving faster than we'd anticipated, which meant our careful, methodical approach might be overtaken by his more aggressive tactics. What exactly are they planning? Amanda handed me a tablet displaying social media monitoring results. They've already started seeding doubt about your credibility. Anonymous posts questioning your professional competence, suggesting you're unstable after a bad breakup, implying that you're fabricating allegations for attention. The posts were subtle but coordinated, appearing across multiple platforms with slight variations in language but consistent messaging. Meridian Strategic clearly understood digital manipulation as well as I did. There's more, Amanda continued grimly. They're planning to leak selected communications between you and Tyler, taking things out of context to make you appear obsessive and vindictive. They're also preparing statements from character witnesses who will testify to Tyler's professionalism and integrity. The strategy was predictable but potentially effective. By painting me as an unstable ex-girlfriend seeking revenge, they could undermine the credibility of all the evidence I'd compiled, regardless of how well documented it was. Do we know which communications they have? Tyler saved screenshots of your text conversations over the past year. Meridian's plan is to release them selectively, focusing on moments when you expressed frustration or disappointment with his behavior. Out of context, they could make you seem needy and irrational. The violation felt deeply personal, but I forced myself to analyze it strategically. Tyler had been documenting our relationship for potential future manipulation, another sign of his calculating, predatory mindset. What about the character witnesses? Mostly Harrison Digital employees who worked with Tyler before his recent problems became apparent. They genuinely believe Tyler is competent and professional because they never saw his manipulative behavior toward romantic partners. Amanda was right to be concerned. A coordinated campaign combining reputation attacks, selective evidence, and credible character testimony could create enough doubt to neutralize my exposure efforts. But Meridian Strategic had made one crucial error in their assessment. They were treating this like a typical executive scandal, where the goal was simply to survive until public attention moved elsewhere. They didn't understand that I wasn't just seeking Tyler's downfall, but building a new career specialization that required his complete professional destruction. When are they planning to launch? I asked. Tomorrow morning, coordinated releases to industry publications, social media campaigns, and direct outreach to your current clients. They want to overwhelm you with multiple crisis points simultaneously. I checked my phone. Dr. Rodriguez had scheduled follow-up meetings with potential clients for the next few days. meetings that could be severely undermined if my credibility was successfully attacked before they occurred. We need to accelerate our timeline, I decided. If Meridian launches tomorrow, we launch tonight. Amanda looked surprised. What do you have in mind? I opened my laptop and began pulling up files I'd been preparing for the past week. A complete information dump. Everything we have about Tyler's pattern of behavior, supported by documentation and corroborated by multiple victims. We release it simultaneously across every platform and send it directly to every major player in our industry. The nuclear option. Instead of continuing our gradual exposure strategy, we would deploy everything at once, creating such overwhelming evidence that Meridian's counter-narrative would seem obviously fabricated. That's risky, Amanda warned. If we move too fast, it could look desperate or unsubstantiated. It's riskier to let Meridian control the narrative, I countered. Once doubt is created about my credibility, even perfect evidence becomes questionable. We need to establish the truth before they can muddy it. I started composing the comprehensive report while Amanda coordinated with Sarah Kim and Monica Reeves to ensure they were prepared for the accelerated timeline. The document would be massive, combining personal testimonies, financial evidence, communication records, and professional analysis into an undeniable case study of systematic predatory behavior. But I also needed something that would capture immediate attention and make the story impossible to ignore. Tyler had given me that gift with his threatening email, but I needed to deploy it strategically for maximum impact. Dr. Rodriguez arrived at Amanda's office within an hour, bringing with her 2 additional allies I hadn't expected, Jennifer Walsh and David Kim, the executives from our morning meeting. Jennifer and David insisted on being here, Dr. Rodriguez explained. After reviewing the evidence you presented this morning, they realized their companies could be legal targets if Tyler's harassment escalates. Jennifer Walsh looked furious as she reviewed Amanda's intelligence about Meridian Strategic. Our company has a zero-tolerance policy for this kind of predatory behavior. If Tyler Harrison has been using professional relationships to exploit women, we need to ensure he can never access our vendor networks. David Kim nodded in agreement. The tech industry has enough problems with gender discrimination and harassment. We can't allow systematic predators to operate under the guise of business development. Their support transformed my exposure campaign from personal vendetta to corporate responsibility initiative. With 2 Fortune 500 companies backing the narrative, Meridian Strategic's counterattacks would seem like desperate damage control rather than credible rebuttals. What do you need from us? Jennifer asked. I outlined my plan for the comprehensive information release, emphasizing how their corporate backing would legitimize the evidence and demonstrate industry-wide concern about predatory behavior. We'll provide official statements condemning Tyler's tactics and announcing policy changes to prevent similar exploitation in our vendor relationships, Jennifer decided immediately. David Kim agreed to coordinate with other tech executives to create a unified industry response. Tyler Harrison needs to understand that his behavior has consequences beyond his personal relationships. This is about professional ethics and corporate responsibility. As evening approached, our expanded team worked with military precision to prepare the coordinated release. Amanda handled media outreach to industry publications, ensuring they had the complete story before Meridian Strategic could plant their counter-narrative. Sarah and Monica recorded video testimonials that would be impossible to dismiss as fabricated or exaggerated. Dr. Rodriguez contacted academic colleagues and professional organizations to provide expert commentary on predatory behavior patterns. I focused on the centerpiece, a comprehensive case study titled Professional Predation in Digital Marketing, a systematic analysis of manipulative tactics and industry prevention strategies. The document combined rigorous analysis with compelling personal stories, creating something that was simultaneously academic research and devastating exposé. But the real weapon was Tyler's threatening email, which I positioned as evidence of how predators respond when their tactics are exposed. The message demonstrated Tyler's willingness to use professional retaliation against women who challenged him, validating everything the other victims had experienced. At 9 p.m., we launched everything simultaneously. The comprehensive case study went to every major industry publication, professional organization, and digital marketing conference organizer. Sarah's and Monica's video testimonials were released on LinkedIn with detailed written accounts of their experiences. Corporate statements from Jennifer's and David's companies announced new vendor screening protocols specifically designed to identify and prevent predatory behavior. Most importantly, Tyler's threatening email was leaked to TechCrunch with expert commentary from Dr. Rodriguez about how the message exemplified typical predator responses to exposure. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My LinkedIn notifications crashed within minutes as thousands of industry professionals shared, commented, and expressed support. The hashtag Ali Predatory Prevention started trending on Twitter as other women shared their own experiences with manipulative business partners. TechCrunch published the threatening email story within 2 hours, leading with the headline, "Digital Marketing Executive Threatens Woman Who Exposed Predatory Business Tactics." The article positioned Tyler's email as evidence of systematic intimidation tactics used against women who challenged unethical behavior. By midnight, every major industry publication had picked up some aspect of the story. Tyler Harrison's name was permanently associated with professional predation, manipulation, and intimidation of women in business relationships. Amanda monitored Tyler's response through her private investigator, who reported increasing panic at Meridian Strategic as they realized their carefully planned counter-narrative had been completely overwhelmed by our preemptive strike. Tyler's been calling Meridian's crisis team all evening, Amanda reported. They're trying to accelerate their own timeline, but our information dump has created so much momentum that anything they release now will look defensive and reactive. The beauty of digital marketing expertise was understanding how information spreads and how narratives form in real time. Tyler's crisis management team was using traditional PR tactics against someone who understood viral content creation and social media amplification strategies. But Tyler's response exceeded even my expectations for desperate behavior. Instead of accepting defeat or attempting damage control, he chose the nuclear option, legal warfare. At 2 a.m., I received an email from a law firm I'd never heard of, threatening immediate legal action for defamation, harassment, and tortious interference with business relationships. Tyler was claiming that my exposure campaign constituted false and malicious statements designed to destroy his livelihood. The legal threat was clearly written by expensive attorneys, filled with intimidating language about substantial damages and aggressive prosecution of all available remedies. Tyler was trying to use his remaining financial resources to silence me through legal intimidation. But he'd made a critical miscalculation. Everything I'd published was meticulously documented and legally defensible. More importantly, I now had corporate backing from companies with substantial legal resources of their own. Jennifer Walsh called me within an hour of the legal threat being sent. Our legal team reviewed Tyler's threatening letter, she said, her voice cold with anger. It's exactly the kind of strategic litigation abuse our company policy specifically prohibits. We're authorizing our attorneys to provide you with full legal support. David Kim made a similar commitment, and Dr. Rodriguez contributed connections to employment law specialists who dealt with professional retaliation cases. Tyler had tried to fight superior firepower with legal intimidation, but he was facing an alliance with resources that dwarfed his personal assets. The next morning brought Meridian Strategic's planned counterattack, but it landed like a whisper in a hurricane. Their carefully crafted narrative about unstable ex-girlfriends and fabricated allegations was immediately overwhelmed by the industry-wide conversation about predatory behavior prevention that our information dump had created. Major tech conferences announced new speaker screening protocols. Professional organizations issued statements about ethical standards in business relationships. academic institutions began developing curriculum about recognizing and preventing professional manipulation. Tyler Harrison had become a cautionary tale rather than a sympathetic figure, and Meridian Strategic's reputation repair tactics looked increasingly desperate and tone-deaf. But the most satisfying response came from Victoria Sterling herself. As Tyler's professional reputation collapsed and his legal threats multiplied, Victoria quietly announced that Sterling Social was reevaluating its strategic partnerships and would be focusing on organic growth rather than collaborative ventures. Amanda's intelligence network confirmed what we'd suspected. Victoria was abandoning Tyler exactly as she'd planned from the beginning. With Tyler's reputation destroyed and his Harrison digital connections severed, he offered nothing valuable to her business expansion plans. The predator had become the prey, manipulated and discarded by someone who understood his tactics better than he did. Tyler's final communication to me came 3 days later, sent from his personal email account with obvious desperation, replacing his previous arrogance. "Jessica, I know things got out of hand between us. Maybe we can work something out privately, away from all the lawyers and media attention. I never meant for things to escalate this far. Can we talk about resolving this situation professionally?" The message was clearly written with legal advice, attempting to create a record of Tyler seeking reasonable resolution while implying that I was the one responsible for escalation. But it was also evidence of his complete defeat, a request for mercy from someone who had shown none to his previous victims. I forwarded the email to my legal team without responding. Tyler Harrison no longer deserved the courtesy of direct communication, and anything I said could potentially be used against me in whatever legal proceedings he was still contemplating. Instead, I focused on the extraordinary opportunities that had emerged from Tyler's destruction. 3 additional corporations had requested consulting contracts for predatory behavior prevention protocols. Dr. Rodriguez was negotiating a book deal about professional manipulation tactics in business. Relationships. Sarah Kim was returning to Los Angeles to rebuild her career with support from several companies that wanted to demonstrate their commitment to ethical vendor relationships. Tyler's systematic exploitation of women had inadvertently created a new industry specialization and a network of professionals committed to preventing similar abuse. His predatory behavior had been transformed into preventive education and corporate policy reform. The irony was perfect. Tyler Harrison, who had built his career by exploiting women's professional vulnerabilities, had ultimately empowered those same women to create systemic changes that would protect future victims from similar predators. His downfall was complete, but our transformation was just beginning. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of the Century Plaza Hotel, adjusting the microphone clipped to my blazer as conference organizers made final preparations for my keynote presentation. The digital marketing industry's largest annual gathering was about to hear from someone who had become an unexpected authority on professional ethics and predatory behavior prevention. The transformation still felt surreal sometimes. Martinez Digital Strategies had evolved into Martinez Professional Protection Consulting, specializing in helping corporations identify and prevent manipulative business relationships. My client roster included Fortune 500 companies, major tech firms, and international marketing agencies, all seeking expertise in creating safer professional environments. Dr. Rodriguez approached with her usual confident stride, tablet in hand, displaying the latest metrics from our collaborative research project. "The preliminary results from our corporate implementation study are remarkable," she said, her voice carrying satisfaction mixed with professional excitement. Companies that adopted our prevention protocols reported a 73% reduction in vendor relationship issues and an 81% improvement in employee confidence about reporting concerning behavior. The numbers represented more than statistical success. They meant fewer women would experience what Sarah, Monica, and I had endured. They meant systematic predators would find it increasingly difficult to operate in professional environments without detection. Any word from the publishers about the book proposal? I asked. Harvard Business Review Press wants to fast-track publication. They're calling it Essential Reading for Modern Corporate Leadership. The working title is Predatory Partnerships: Recognizing and Preventing Professional Manipulation in Business Relationships. A year ago, I'd been waiting desperately in an airport departure lounge, my entire future seemingly dependent on Tyler Harrison's arrival. Now I was authoring what would likely become required reading in business schools and corporate training programs. The irony wasn't lost on me that Tyler's abandonment had ultimately led to opportunities far beyond anything our relationship could have provided. Amanda Harrison appeared beside us, looking polished and confident in her role as Harrison, Digital's new chief ethics officer. Her father had appointed her to the position after Tyler's departure, recognizing that the company needed fundamental cultural reform to rebuild its reputation. The industry response to your presentation topic has been incredible, Amanda reported. Registration for this session exceeded capacity by 300%. They've moved you to the main auditorium to accommodate demand. My presentation was titled, From Victim to Victory: Transforming Professional Trauma into Industry Reform. The session would detail how individual experiences of manipulation could be leveraged to create systematic change, using my own journey as a case study in personal empowerment and corporate responsibility. Any updates on Tyler's situation? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Amanda's expression grew satisfied in a way that suggested justice had continued its work. He's still unemployed. The legal bills from his failed defamation lawsuit consumed most of his personal savings, and the industry reputation damage has made him essentially unemployable in digital marketing. Tyler's desperate legal campaign had backfired spectacularly. His attorneys had struggled to prove defamation when every statement I'd made was documented and verifiable. Worse, the lawsuit had kept his predatory behavior in the news for months, ensuring that every potential employer could easily find detailed accounts of his misconduct. Victoria Sterling's company went public last month, Amanda continued with obvious amusement. Her IPO filing mentioned strategic partnership restructuring as a key factor in their recent growth. She never mentioned Tyler by name, but everyone in the industry understood the reference. Victoria had played Tyler perfectly, extracting valuable business intelligence and client relationships before discarding him at precisely the moment his reputation became toxic. Her success story had become another cautionary tale about the dangers of manipulative business practices, though from a different perspective than mine. What about the other women, Sarah and Monica? Sarah's consulting firm in LA is thriving. She's become the go-to expert for companies wanting to break into Korean markets ethically and authentically. Monica relocated back to LA and started a boutique PR firm specializing in crisis management for companies dealing with ethical violations. The network of women Tyler had attempted to destroy had not only recovered but flourished, creating a professional community dedicated to preventing others from experiencing similar exploitation. We'd transformed individual trauma into collective strength and industry influence. As I prepared for my presentation, I reflected on the profound changes that had occurred since that afternoon at LAX. The woman who had waited desperately for Tyler's arrival was gone, replaced by someone who understood her own value and refused to accept less than she deserved. The presentation hall was indeed packed beyond capacity, with additional screens in overflow rooms and live stream access for remote attendees. The audience included executives, entrepreneurs, consultants, and academics, all seeking insights into creating more ethical professional environments. I began with the moment at the airport, describing the shock and humiliation of being abandoned without identification or resources. The audience was immediately engaged, recognizing the vulnerability that many professionals faced when personal and business relationships became intertwined. What I didn't understand at the time, I explained, was that my abandonment wasn't personal failure, but professional targeting. I'd been selected, cultivated, and exploited through a systematic process, that predators use to extract value from successful women while maintaining plausible deniability about their intentions. I detailed Tyler's tactics: the initial romantic approach that created emotional investment, the gradual isolation from professional networks, the appropriation of expertise and client relationships, and finally the cruel disposal when a more advantageous opportunity presented itself. The pattern is consistent across industries and geographic regions, I continued, displaying research data on the screen behind me. Professional predators operate like corporate raiders, identifying valuable targets, extracting maximum benefit, then moving on to the next opportunity while leaving destruction behind. The audience was silent, many probably recognizing elements of their own experiences, or those of colleagues they'd witnessed being manipulated and discarded. I outlined the prevention protocols Dr. Rodriguez and I had developed, explaining how companies could implement screening processes, create reporting mechanisms, and establish clear boundaries around professional relationships that crossed into personal territory. The goal isn't to prevent authentic business partnerships or romantic relationships that develop naturally between colleagues, I clarified. The goal is to identify and stop systematic predators who use emotional manipulation to exploit professional vulnerabilities. The response was extraordinary. Questions continued long past the scheduled session time, with audience members sharing their own experiences and requesting additional resources. Several conference organizers approached about developing training programs for industry associations and corporate clients. But the most meaningful moment came during the networking reception that evening. A young woman approached me, her expression mixing nervousness with determination. "Ms. Martinez, I think I'm dealing with something similar to what you experienced," she said quietly. "My business partner has been gradually taking credit for my work while isolating me from our clients. I wasn't sure if I was overreacting, but your presentation helped me understand what's really happening." I spent 20 minutes with her, providing specific guidance about documenting the predatory behavior and connecting her with resources for legal and emotional support. By the end of our conversation, she had a clear action plan and the confidence to implement it. This was why Tyler's betrayal had ultimately been a gift. Without experiencing his manipulation firsthand, I never would have developed the expertise to help other women recognize and resist similar predators. As the conference wound down, I found myself back at LAX, this time departing for a consulting engagement in New York, rather than waiting desperately for someone else to control my travel plans. The airport that had once represented my lowest moment now symbolized my professional independence and success. While waiting at my gate, I noticed a commotion near the international terminal. A man was arguing loudly with airline staff, gesturing angrily, while a woman beside him looked increasingly uncomfortable. The dynamic was painfully familiar. Public humiliation as a control tactic, emotional manipulation disguised as relationship, drama. I approached the woman during a brief pause in the man's tirade. "Excuse me, are you okay?" I asked quietly. "Do you need assistance?" She looked surprised, then grateful. "I'm fine. Just some travel stress," she replied, but her eyes told a different story. I handed her my business card discreetly. "If you ever need someone to talk to about professional or personal relationships that feel manipulative, please reach out. Sometimes an outside perspective can be helpful." The man returned before she could respond, but I noticed her slip my card into her purse. Perhaps she'd never need the resources I offered, but if she did, she'd know where to find help. My phone buzzed with a text from Mia, who was tracking my flight status from her expanded coffee shop empire. Her business had grown significantly since I'd started recommending her locations for client meetings, creating another example of how authentic professional relationships could benefit everyone involved. "Safe travels, corporate crusader," the message read. "Can't wait to hear about the New York meetings. Still can't believe my college roommate became a business ethics guru." The characterization made me smile. Business ethics guru was certainly not a career path I'd planned, but it had become deeply fulfilling in ways I never could have anticipated. Helping other women avoid manipulation while building prevention systems that protected entire organizations provided purpose that went far beyond personal satisfaction. As my flight boarded, I noticed the woman from the terminal commotion was on the same plane, now sitting alone while the man was nowhere to be seen. She caught my eye and mouthed, "Thank you," confirming that the brief intervention had provided some value. The flight to New York gave me time to review materials for my upcoming client presentations. 3 major corporations were implementing comprehensive prevention protocols based on my recommendations, and 2 academic institutions wanted to develop research partnerships around professional manipulation tactics. But the most intriguing opportunity was a collaboration with federal law enforcement agencies that were investigating sophisticated fraud schemes targeting women entrepreneurs. My expertise in recognizing predatory patterns had applications beyond traditional corporate consulting, potentially helping identify and prosecute systematic predators operating across multiple industries. The scope of impact was expanding rapidly, transforming personal trauma into social change that could protect countless women from experiencing similar exploitation. Upon landing at JFK, I was met by a car service arranged by my New York client, a luxury I never would have imagined during my previous visit to this airport system. The driver was professional and courteous, the vehicle comfortable and well-appointed, the entire experience reflecting the status and success I'd built since Tyler's abandonment. As we drove through Queens toward Manhattan, I thought about the parallel universe where Tyler hadn't betrayed me, where we'd taken that Tokyo trip together and possibly gotten engaged as he'd planned. In that reality, I would have remained Jessica Martinez, competent but constrained digital marketing consultant, dependent on Tyler's connections and gradually diminished by his manipulative control. His cruelty had inadvertently liberated me from a future that would have been professionally and personally limiting. By showing me his true nature in the most brutal way possible, Tyler had forced me to develop strength and independence I might never have discovered otherwise. The irony was that Tyler's systematic exploitation of women had ultimately empowered those same women to create changes that would prevent future predators from operating successfully. His legacy was the opposite of what he'd intended: a network of successful, aware women who actively worked to protect others from manipulation. My phone rang as we approached Midtown Manhattan. Amanda's name appeared on the screen, and I answered, with curiosity about what new development she might be reporting. "Jessica, you're not going to believe this," she said, her voice mixing amusement with satisfaction. "Tyler applied for a position at a small marketing firm in Phoenix. They called me for a reference." The conversation that followed was predictable. Amanda had provided a completely honest assessment of Tyler's professional conduct, emphasizing his pattern of manipulative behavior and the legal and ethical problems he'd created for Harrison Digital. The Phoenix firm had withdrawn their offer immediately. "He's essentially blacklisted at this point," Amanda concluded. "Word has spread throughout the industry about his tactics. No reputable firm will risk hiring him, and his attempts to start an independent consultancy have failed because potential clients research his background and find all the negative coverage." Tyler's professional destruction was complete and apparently permanent. He'd become a cautionary tale about the long-term consequences of treating people as disposable resources, his name permanently associated with predatory behavior and ethical violations. "What's he doing now?" I asked, more curious than concerned. "According to my investigator, he's working at a retail electronics store in Scottsdale. Minimum wage, no benefits, no prospects for advancement. His parents cut off financial support after the legal bills became public, and Victoria Sterling made sure he couldn't access any of the business relationships he'd helped her develop." The fall from privileged heir to retail employee was dramatic, but it was also justice. Tyler had spent years exploiting women's professional vulnerabilities for personal gain. Now he was experiencing genuine vulnerability himself, with no one to exploit and no advantages to leverage. My New York meetings exceeded expectations, resulting in comprehensive consulting contracts and the establishment of a permanent East Coast office for my expanding practice. The demand for professional manipulation prevention expertise continued growing as more companies recognized the legal and reputational risks of inadequate screening and prevention protocols. During my final meeting with a major investment firm that managed billions in tech startup funding, I learned about an interesting development that connected directly to Tyler's downfall. We've started requiring all portfolio companies to implement certified prevention protocols before receiving funding, the managing partner explained. Professional predation represents significant risk to startup success, both from internal team dynamics and external business relationships. The policy meant that Tyler's behavior had indirectly influenced investment decisions affecting hundreds of emerging companies. His manipulation tactics had become so widely recognized and reviled that preventing similar behavior was now considered essential due diligence. As I flew back to Los Angeles, I realized that Tyler Harrison had achieved a kind of immortality, though not the type he'd intended. His name would be permanently associated with professional manipulation prevention, his tactics studied and countered, his downfall used as evidence that predatory behavior ultimately carried catastrophic consequences. The woman he'd abandoned at LAX had become someone he could never have imagined, a successful entrepreneur, industry thought leader, and advocate for systematic change. His cruelty had been transformed into strength that protected countless other women from experiencing similar exploitation. My phone buzzed with a notification as the plane began its descent into LAX. A LinkedIn message from the woman I'd encountered at the airport that morning, sent from her own account rather than shared access that might be monitored. Thank you for your kindness at the airport today. I've been researching your work since our conversation, and I think I need to have a serious discussion with someone who understands these dynamics. Would you be available for a consultation next week? Another woman recognizing manipulation and seeking help to escape it. Another opportunity to transform individual trauma into empowerment and protection. Another victory against the predatory tactics that Tyler Harrison had perfected and ultimately weaponized against himself. As I collected my luggage and headed toward the exit, I passed the same international terminal where Tyler had abandoned me exactly 1 year ago. The space looked identical, but my relationship to it had been completely transformed. Instead of representing humiliation and betrayal, it now symbolized the beginning of the most successful period of my life. Tyler Harrison had intended to discard me like the women before me, leaving me stranded and professionally damaged while he built his future with someone else. Instead, his abandonment had liberated me to build something far more significant than he could have provided. A career based on my own expertise, a network of authentic professional relationships, and the satisfaction of preventing other women from experiencing his manipulation. The predator had become the prey, destroyed by the very tactics he'd used to exploit others. Justice had been served, but more importantly, systematic change had been implemented to prevent future predators from operating successfully. Tyler's nightmare was my triumph, and it was only the beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.